My fellow Americans, welcome to The Celluloid President, the podcast about American presidents on film. Today we're discussing Primary Colors, the 1998 Mike Nichols movie that is kind of, sort of, or maybe a lot based on Bill Clinton.
I, William Jefferson Clinton, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
I'm Gary Holmes, and joining me today via Zoom from California is Jim Robinson, who would never, ever allow himself to be seduced by any candidate's charisma, right?
You got that right, Gary, but there's one exception, the undeniable, unresistible charisma of Richard M. Nixon.
Right. Who won in a landslide, despite
Absolutely.
not having any charisma. Exactly. All right. Well, let's put our cards on the table here, Jim. Bill Clinton was one of our most divisive presidents. What's your take on him then and now?
Well, it's funny, Gary, how past presidents keep looking better to me as we look at our more recent presidents. They look better at least up to the year 2000, let me put it that way.
Yeah, I know you're a Kennedy lover now, for God's sakes.
Exactly. During the 90s, when Clinton was president, I have to admit I was caught up in the partisan back and forth and often happily joined in the vilification of Bill Clinton. But he himself, of course, was busily vilifying Republicans and Newt Gingrich and all that. But looking back, I'd give anything to have a Democratic president now say the things that Bill Clinton was saying then, wouldn't you?
Yeah, no, I know. I mean, I got to say that I really, really hated Bill Clinton in the way that liberals hated Nixon and that they've later hated Trump. I mean, way out of proportion to who he was. I thought he was a phony, a liar, a manipulator. And I should have been actually more sympathetic because aside from maybe Abe Lincoln and Andrew Jackson, he grew up as one of our poorest presidents, but he climbed out of poverty into the upper classes, and he was an early manifestation of that Ivy League educated elite that afflicts us now, and that just drove me crazy. But as a president, in terms of policy, he wasn't really that terrible. I mean, the economy was good. We even had a balanced budget in the late 1990s.
Yeah, well, if you think about it, I've been thinking about the 90s because you're right. Wasn't that bad. It was really influenced that decade, not by one man, but by three. Bill Clinton, Newt Gingrich,
Yeah.
and Bill Gates, who he and others led the infotech revolution during that decade. And they really accounted for the prosperity of the economy. And what you can say about Clinton and Gingrich is that they produced the government gridlock that kept government out of the way of all that and also restrained the growth of government. Gridlock can be good.
Well, yeah. I mean, you mentioned two politicians and then one unelected leader, and who was basically flying under the radar. But you're right. Microsoft transformed the way transformed the economy, and the gridlock between Congress and the White House prevented a lot of what Clinton was trying to accomplish, which is why he had such a successful president, because he couldn't accomplish what he was trying to.
Well, exactly. And I'd make two other points. One, you often hear people say that Obama was a once in a generation
Yeah.
political talent for the Democrats. I think Clinton fits that bill more. I've met Bill Clinton. I met him before he became president, and I met him after he left office. And I got to tell you, the first time was at a governor's conference, and golf was on the program for the afternoon. But before then, they had some education expert, kind of boring, come in to talk to all the governors. And you can just see most of the governors looking at their watches and all that, trying to get out of there. Bill Clinton kept asking questions and appeared to be genuinely interested in the minutia of education policy. And then finally he shut up, and all of the governors ran for the doors, and he hung around and talked to the staff. about what he just heard about education. So I mean, I think he was a genuine people person, and I give him and a talent, a political talent.
Yeah, no, he has that combination, which we see in this movie, of a policy nerd extraordinaire and a once in a generation charismatic guy able to read the room. Laser sharp in his identification of what is going to be popular with the people he's talking to. So, yeah, I mean, he was great.
On the other side of the coin, we got to do the other side of the coin. The country was trying something new when they elected Bill Clinton. They elected our first baby boomer president.
Right,
And let's face it, much of our baby boomer cohort, and we are among them, we're not exactly known for self discipline. We're
right.
not exactly known for their ability to control their self indulgence. And you can see that in Clinton. You can see that in Newt Gingrich. And we learned later on that it was there in Bill Gates as well. And how many baby boomers can you actually point to that acted like Boy Scouts their entire lives? I can only think of one, and that's you, Gary. Get a life, man.
Well, yeah, the baby boomers were the baby boomers were such bad presidents that we went ahead and elected two people from the previous generation, whatever that, a
Right?
silent generation, and they were very disciplined and very, they were terrific. So, yeah, Biden and Trump are both older than Bill Clinton was.
Right.
All right, so let's talk about the movie since that's our and it's my turn to do the summary today. And like the good baby boomer I am, I have experimented with GPG chat, and I had artificial intelligence write the summary. So are you ready?
Oh boy.
Oh boy,
We're
it's
going to be
actually not
embarrassed
bad.
because it's
It's
going to
not
be so
bad.
much better than us.
Exactly. All right. So, Primary Colors is a 1998 political comedy drama based on the novel of the same name by Joe Klein. The movie offers a fictionalized account of a presidential campaign, loosely inspired by the 1992 campaign of Bill Clinton. Directed by Mike Nichols, the film explores the behind the scenes world of politics, highlighting the personal and professional challenges faced by the campaign staff. The story revolves around the charismatic Southern Governor Jack Stanton, played by John Travolta, who is running for the Democratic Party's presidential nomination. Stanton's campaign is led by his brilliant and loyal advisor, Henry Burton, played by Adrian Lester. As the campaign progresses, Henry becomes increasingly disillusioned with the moral compromises and scandals that surround Stanton. The film delves into the complex dynamics of the campaign, including the power struggles, media manipulation, and compromises made to win political battles. Emma Thompson plays Susan Stanton, Jack's intelligent and resilient wife, who must navigate her own emotions and political ambitions while standing by her husband's side. The cast also includes Kathy Bates as Libby Holden, a fierce and outspoken campaign operative. Operative, yeah. Primary Colors examines the ethical dilemmas faced by those in politics and questions the price that must be paid for power. It touches on various themes such as loyalty, idealism, moral compromise, and the blurred lines between personal and political lives. Overall, Primary Colors is a satirical and thought provoking film that offers a fictionalized glimpse into the world of American politics, exposing the triumphs and shortcomings of those seeking political office. There you go.
Well, I've got an idea, Gary. There must also be an ability to have a guest voice read these artificial. So let's get some really sexy woman voice to read it next time, and that will liven up the podcast a little.
Okay, yeah. No, well, you're canceled, by the way, for that kind of remark.
Oh, sorry.
Um, so I'm going to add a couple of
Sure.
points, important plot points of my own so that we can understand what's going on. So the story's told, as we said, through the eyes of Henry Burton, he's based on George Stephanopoulos, except that
Oh,
he's black.
right.
Other characters are based on campaign operatives, James Carville, Mandy Greenwald, Harold Ickes, Susan Thomases, and Betsy Wright. It follows the early stages of the 92 Democratic presidential primaries. This will sound familiar to all of us of a certain age. The Stanton campaign is rocked by several sex scandals and one youthful Vietnam War indiscretion, all of which Stanton wriggles out of. We see debates and town halls during which it emerges that Stanton is ideologically in the middle, neither too progressive nor too conservative. Stanton has a lot of luck. His strongest challenger, the governor of New York, who's based on Mario Cuomo, drops out. The leading candidate, the squeaky clean senator from New England, based on Paul Tsongas, has a couple of heart attacks. Another leading candidate, a former governor of Florida, probably based on Reuben Askew, who jumps into the race after those heart attacks, turns out to have a cocaine addiction and an incident of gay sex in his past. So those are some other key plot points that we'll be talking about through here.
Well, what you revealed, Gary, in that is that you really need a dance card written out to follow this movie and enjoy all of the innuendo and
Right,
gossip.
right.
Because you have to have pure interest in the whole Clinton extended family and in the politics to really enjoy this movie and say, aha, now I know who that's supposed to be.
Right.
And I know what the real story was there. And I
Yeah.
know how this was exaggerated in the film compared to real life. You really need to sort of almost make a little crib note sheet for yourself about who's who. You did it pretty well there. But
Yeah.
I had to keep going back and reminding myself.
Well, I know. I mean, because the guy, I mean, Henry Burton doesn't, I would never would have guessed, to be honest with you, that that's supposedly based on George Stephanopoulos, because he doesn't have, Stephanopoulos was in charge of the press, the media, and this Burton guy is based on, his job is basically hardcore campaign strategy. So,
Well,
uh,
the other example is Libby Holden,
yeah,
played by Kathy Bates, is an amalgamation of Betsy Wright, Clinton's gubernatorial chief of staff and
right.
confidant, and Vince Foster,
Yeah.
his boyhood friend who was the one who committed suicide in the movie. Libby Holden commits suicide. Betsy Wright is still very much alive.
Yeah, she sure is. This movie is based on a book, as I said, that was written by Joe Klein, that was published under the name Anonymous. Did you ever read it?
No, I didn't read the book. The book it was a success. It was on the New York Times bestseller list. I have to say, I find something sleazy in the whole idea of making this anonymous. I mean, he covered the campaign of '92 for Newsweek.
Right.
Why couldn't he be allowed to write a novel, that was loosely based on the campaign? Maybe he didn't want to burn contacts or whatever, but you know, maybe being anonymous was just a marketing
I think it
device.
probably was because I mean we spent over a year listening to gossip about who it was and so much speculation, and they were doing all this close reading, and
Well,
it was
the
ridiculous.
other thing is it makes you become a liar.
Yeah.
And Joe Klein lied to the faces of his own employers at Newsweek and said he wasn't the author. And he went on television and lied about it. So, it's a high ethical price to pay, I think, for a marketing device or wanting a little protection over the anonymous thing. It reminds me of the supposedly high level insider that wrote an anonymous book during the Trump administration. Turned out to be a low level guy nobody ever heard of.
Right.
And he too had to go on television and lie to the face of the people that were interviewing him. It's a sleazy action, in my view.
Yeah, no, I agree. The book was a huge bestseller. It sold over 1 million copies. And, I was kind of curious about how close it was based, how closely the movie was based on it. So I went to the library to get a copy of it. Not there. One of the
Really?
biggest bestsellers of the 1990s. Just it's like it didn't even exist. That just shows you that a book like that can be a huge hit and then it just drops out of. I mean, I haven't heard anyone talk about Primary Colors, the book, in a long time.
Right.
I want to just say one more thing about Primary Colors. I don't know if you're familiar with this book, All the King's Men.
Yes.
Yeah, so it was
And the
written by,
movie.
yeah, and the
And the
movie,
movie.
right? This book and a movie written by It's about Huey Long by Robert Penn Warren. I've read the book. It's a really really excellent book. The protagonist in that book is named Jack Burton. Jack Burton, a lot like Henry Burton. So, I mean, there's another thing that Joel Klein is doing here. He's trying to like wrap himself in the in the same cloth
Yeah.
as Robert Penn Warren, which I'm pretty sure he is not in that same league. All right, let's talk about. I want to before we get to more into the movie, I want to talk a little bit about the director and screenwriter. So the first credit on the screen is directed by Mike Nichols. The second credit is written by Elaine May.
Mhm.
Now, there's a certain kind of comedy nerd that goes, "Wow, Nichols and May are back together again." This is a famous sketch comedy team from the 1950s. They didn't exactly invent improv, but they popularized it. They were very famous late 50s and early 60s until they broke up. Um, Nichols and May, huge comedy team that
Yeah,
my
Grammy
family,
Award winning albums.
yeah, my family loved this. We used to listen, we had the CDs and we listened to them on car rides, and we knew the comedy sketches by heart. So when I saw that the two of them were together in this movie, I was just really thrilled.
I never did. I never listened to them. I never even heard of the fact they were a comedy team until I looked into this movie.
Yeah.
And it just astounded me how Nichols, especially, was able to reinvent himself.
Well, Nichols is,
Unbelievable.
yeah, I know. I mean, he's a major cultural figure from the 60s and 70s. In addition to the comedy sketch, then he was a big director on Broadway. And then he's a famous director. And of course, I mean, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, The Graduate, especially,
Yeah.
Carnal Knowledge, Working Girl, Charlie Wilson's War, The Birdcage, a lot of movies that we know about.
It actually kills me because how many of us hope that maybe we're a little bit good at just one thing? And he just seems good at so much.
Yeah, poor Elaine May, though, her career wasn't quite as successful. She's probably most famous for directing Ishtar, which is one of the great all-time
Uh-oh.
Hollywood bombs. So, but she is a highly regarded screenwriter, and this was their last collaboration.
I
So,
think she's still alive. She's ancient.
yeah, she's like 93.
Yeah, he's dead. He's dead.
He's dead. I mean, she's
Um,
still alive. Her daughter is Julie Berlin. She played a character on Secession this year, and her daughter looks like she's like 93 years old. So I can't
hmm.
imagine what Elaine May looks like now.
Well,
But
they had top talent, and the book was a bestseller. How did the movie do at the box office?
it's another flop.
Boy,
Um,
we really know how to pick them.
Despite a great cast, you got Nichols and May and ripped from the headline story. It only generated box office of $39 million and 52 million worldwide against a budget of 65 million. So it lost money. Ranked number 49 that year. 1998 was a pretty good year for movies. The number one movie was Titanic with $600 million, followed by Armageddon, Saving Private Ryan, There's Something About Mary, and Waterboy. It had a mixed reaction among critics. Two Academy Award nominations. For Kathy Bates won for was nominated for Best Supporting Actor, and Elaine May was a screenwriter. What I mean,
Well, we're about 3 for 9 in picking box office winners, Gary. What's going on here?
I don't know. I mean, I have a theory that people don't really want to see movies about presidents, especially while they're in office. Half the country hates the guy that's president, and eventually will hate the woman that's president. And so you're just sort of ruling out half the audience as it is. And I think there's a specific problem in this case, which is that when they started writing the movie, they didn't know that there was going to be a Monica Lewinsky scandal.
Life is going to imitate art.
Life was going to imitate art, exactly. So that happened in 1998, just before this movie came out. And I don't think anyone really wanted to be reminded of Clinton's previous sex scandals and the dynamics of the Clinton marriage at that time.
Well, just to reassure you, I looked up a couple of the movies that we'll eventually do podcasts on that I thought maybe were winners. And there are at least a couple I found. JFK, the
Okay.
Oliver Stone conspiracy theory movie about the assassination,
Right.
made a lot of money. And so did All the President's Men.
Yeah.
So there are examples, and we'll get to them eventually. Don't
Yeah.
worry, Gary.
No, but they're flop after flop. I mean, it's really amazing. Anyway, we'll talk about this more, I guess. So Jim, who would you recommend this movie to, if anyone?
Well, if you're already cynical about the political process and about politicians, I think you'll like this movie because it reinforces all that. So you can sit there and nod your head, yep, that's the way they are. If you're a political junkie and you like the scuttlebutt and the gossip, I think you'll enjoy it because it's fun if you've got your notes that I mentioned there to draw all the parallels between the fictional characters and events and real ones. And also, I think both Clinton haters and Clinton lovers might enjoy this film because each group can find what they're looking for and ignore the other parts.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, yeah, I agree with you. I also would say that a sophisticated watcher who can keep two to three ideas in his head at once, because Clinton himself is such a complicated character that his flaws are there, his strengths are there, and that doesn't appeal to everybody because it's kind of hard to keep opposing views in your head at the same time. But for someone who's like into fairly sophisticated movies, I would say they'd like this movie. And of course,
Yes,
anyone who's interested in getting a feel for what politics was like in the early 1990s I think, would like this movie. If you are woke or allergic to political incorrectness, I would not recommend this movie.
right.
Um, it is, I'm, this is a minefield for us to talk about because there are so many things that happen in this movie that you would be arrested for now if they happened in real life.
You're not thinking about the Billy Bob Thornton character, are you? Enough said.
Yeah,
Watch
we'll
the
get to
movie,
him.
folks.
We'll talk about that later. I actually like this movie. I was surprised that I liked it as much as I did. Like is probably not the strong, because I felt, you end up feeling really dirty and a little depressed afterwards. But I thought it was quite a good, interesting movie, and I would recommend it. I recommended it to my son. I said, "You really got to watch this movie because you won't believe that they were able to make a movie like this."
Well, I liked what I perceived to be the realism
Yeah,
about the political process. I think it did a good job conveying the atmospherics
yeah.
of what it's like to be around a confused, frenetic campaign, for the presidency, where the aides have no real personal life. They're at the beck and call of the egocentric candidate. They're scarfing down junk food all the time. They're using the F bomb every other word. I think it's a good depiction. I've been on a few campaigns, and it's a good depiction of the culture, if you will, of political campaigns, at least in those days.
Yeah, I mean,
And then the performances were solid, and we'll talk about the acting, but I thought the performances were almost uniformly solid. So I like that.
it's a good depiction of what a insurgent campaign is like, a small campaign where nobody thinks you're going to win, and you're really, it's bare bones, and you're just sort of hanging on, and everyone is like uh just saying what's on their mind. And I've the campaign that I was on was the Reagan reelection campaign in '84, and that was like working for General Motors. There was nothing like this. But if except for when Lee Atwater was walking down the hall, then he was a lot like the Billy Bob Thornton character. But aside
Well,
from that,
I couldn't help but think that character was a combination of Carville and the late by then the late Lee Atwater.
Right, right. No, well,
Um,
I just thought about that the second, but I think
oh, definitely.
really I think it was more Lee Atwater even than Carville because
Yeah.
I don't think Carville would have said and done some of the things that Billy Bob Thornton did.
What I
All
didn't
right,
like, what I didn't like about it was not necessarily something that goes to the quality of the movie, but as you said, it was kind of depressing and unsettling. I felt like I almost needed a shower after I watched it.
right.
And Gary, I don't know about you, but I haven't read Faulkner in 50 years since we were in college. And I almost felt like I was watching another depiction of his Snopes family come back to life in the form of the Clintons and their extended political family. I mean, there was a lot of sleaze in this movie from
Um,
top to bottom.
so Jim and I were American Studies majors together in college 50 years ago, and the reference to Snopes family is we're still getting our money's worth. Um,
Yeah.
that's Faulkner at his best. And yes, you're right. I mean, Clinton comes from the lower middle class,
Right.
lower or the upper lower class, and the white trash of Arkansas, and the behavior is there. So
Yeah. I couldn't
I
get that out of my mind. But
yeah, what I didn't like about the movie, I'm not as high-minded as you maybe because I got uh um it was depressing, but I still liked it. I like a good depressing movie. But I actually found it hard to follow the movies at some point. It was not really clear where they were half the time. Are they in New
yeah, that's
Hampshire?
true.
Are they back there in the headquarters? Is that the national headquarters? Or I didn't
And
um
where is this barbecue happening again?
yeah, well, yeah. I mean, and some of the finer points of the campaign were confusing too. It's like they yada yada some plot points. I had a feeling the movie might have been a little bit longer, and they just cut some key scenes out. I was never really sure, like who's like. At one point, Carville just no, Carville quits. Um,
And Mandy
and
Grunwald, did
Mandy
they just
quit.
disappeared?
Mandy Greenwald disappears, and then all of a sudden later we're going to bring her back. It's like, well, where did she go? I mean, she disappeared. I didn't know that she was gone. I mean, what are we talking about here? So I thought the plot was not really that clear. But
Well, don't sell yourself short, Gary. You got Robert Penn Warren worked into this, and I got Faulkner worked in. So we are
all
so
right,
intellectual. It's just
yeah, all
spellbinding.
right. Well, our fan. This is what the people tune in for. Our great American literature insights. All right. What do you think the movie was trying to accomplish?
Well, on one level, I think it's really a pretty devastating takedown of the process of electing a president. I mean,
Yeah,
it's a warts and all portrayal. Um, Nichols and May wanted us to be amused and entertained, but I think they also wanted us to be a bit horrified by how the whole process unfolds. More subtly, I think it might be showing the sort of the futility of holding our political leaders to almost impossible
right.
puritanical standards. I mean, Jack Stanton slash Bill Clinton was a complex figure. He had all these peccadillos and flaws, but he really cared about average people. And I don't think that part was fake in the character we saw in the movie. And was Governor Picker, the Larry Hagman character, was he really a bad guy? I don't think so. But he had bad behavior in the past.
Yeah, I think this movie was basically therapy for Nichols and May. Um, they were in the 50s and 60s. They were among the early political entertainers. They supported Nixon and they supported McGovern in 72. They're your basic, standard, thoughtful, smart liberals who probably saw Clinton as a savior back in 1992. But this movie is now 5 years into the presidency. By this point, Clinton had lost the House and Senate and failed to live up to their expectations. So I think they're trying to show why. And I think it's an amazing critique of a Democratic president by Hollywood. I mean, you'd never see something like that these days.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. it also grapples with the conundrum that Stanton brings out, articulates point blank at a couple times. So does the Hillary character, which is, what do we have to do to get power in order for us to be able to do good?
Right.
And we saw this in the Lincoln film.
Yeah.
What did he have to do to pass the 13th Amendment that amended slavery? But he had a specific objective. In this case, we see Bill and Hillary talking about doing great things once they got into office. But what things?
Well,
They
and
never
that's
really articulated that. They
it,
had no driving mission like Ronald Reagan had. So I really became suspicious that we were supposed to allow their bad behavior in order to get elected so that they could save the country when they got in there. But how were they going to save it? To do what?
well, I think the theory is, and we see this in the very beginning when they're talking about education policy. I think the theory is that they were going to do all the standard, implement all the standard goals that the policies that liberals had talked about for 20 years. They're going to have better education policy,
Healthcare,
health
Hillary care.
care. Exactly. They're going to health care initiative. They're going to do all these things, and none of that really was accomplished. And
And it wasn't
that's
brought out in the movie. And, it's interesting that toward the end of his presidency, Bill Clinton was known to be bemoaning to um, his friends and historians that he wouldn't be considered a consequential president because nothing really big happened. There
right.
were no really huge monumental crises like his successor had less than a year into his term with 9/11. So he didn't really make history after all. That was his goal. That was
Yeah.
the Clintons' goal, was to get in there and change the country. And he really didn't do it, and he knew it.
Yeah. Well, thank God he didn't change the country because, well, actually, I think he kind of changed the country for worse in the sense of by the end of his presidency, we were more at each other's throats than we were at the beginning. But that's actually been the true for almost every president since then. I mean,
Yes, that's true.
we're increasingly divisive, but the Clinton scandals really set that off. I think also I think they're trying to make a commentary about the sad state of the political and media world. And I have a long quote here. I think this is the thesis of the movie, which is stated by Governor Picker, who's played by Larry Hagman. And during one of the debates, he says, if we don't watch out and calm down, it may spin all out of control. The world is getting more and more complicated. Politicians have to explain things to you in simpler terms so they can get their little oversimplified explanations on the evening news. And eventually, instead of even trying to explain, they give up and start slinging mud at each other. And it's all to keep you excited, keep you watching like you're watching a car wreck or a wrestling match. It's just like that's just what it's like. Professional wrestling. It's staged and it's fake and it doesn't mean anything. And I
Mm.
think this is until 2016, the standard critique of politics by thoughtful liberals and conservatives who believed in rational discourse. They're always bemoaning like cable news, social media. I mean, if we could all just sort of act rationally and not get caught up in these animal emotions, we'd be so much better off. And I think that's what the movie's trying to say, and bemoaning that can't happen and blaming it on the media, really.
Well, you reminded me with that quote that Governor Picker was really another one of those combination characters.
Yeah,
There's some Reuben Askew in there. There's some Ross Perot in there, definitely.
right.
And there's some Bill Bradley
Yeah.
in there, because when you read that quote, that reminded me of Bill Bradley. And some of the folksy ways that Picker talked reminded me of Ross Perot looking under the hood, looking under the hood to fix the car. That's what we got to do here. You know,
I think this was the kind of the standard New Republic kind of approach to politics back then. You know, let's let's just let's focus on the policy and not the personalities. I mean, Picker in this movie, he refused to double down on Clinton's or the Jack Stanton's scandals. He didn't stick the knife in when he had a chance to because he wanted to be above it all, above it all. And when the time was reversed, Stanton had no
Compunction.
compunction about doing it to him. Let's talk about the actors. Who did the best impersonation?
Well, I separate my views between impersonations and performance.
Right.
I
Okay.
thought John Travolta did the best impersonation.
Right.
He didn't exactly look like Clinton, but he had the voice down pretty well. He had the hair pretty well, and I think he had the charisma. I happened to have met John Travolta and spent about a half hour with him in a meeting. He was involved in some do-gooder cause during the 1980s when I was working for the governor of California, and he came to the office to talk to the governor and myself and a couple other staffers about it. And he really does have, he had that same soft spoken, sincere quality when he's looking in you in the eye, standing a little closer than a person might normally stand to you, like a politician
Yeah.
would, and really bonding with you with a twinkle in his eye and a sort of open, happy face. And so I thought he did the best impersonation.
Don't you and John Travolta have the same birthday or something?
He was born either one day before me or one day after me, same year.
Yeah. If you had told me that the star of Saturday Night Fever and Grease would be playing a president of the United States, I never would have believed it. But I agree with you. I mean, he did a pretty good imitation. I mean, of how politicians sort of reel you in. And I guess from what you're saying, it wasn't really that much acting because he has that personality in real life.
Yeah,
Uh,
he projects charisma. Um, he also did a good job conveying the volatility of the
yeah,
personality.
yeah,
When he would lose his temper, he would not lose his temper over a big thing, and then a second later lose it over a small thing, like cable TV wasn't working.
right, right,
And
right.
get violent. And in fact, the year after this movie came out, George Stephanopoulos' book came out, and while Clinton was still president, see that did happen before current times, and it was not a totally fawning portrayal. There were some harrowing scenes in that book of absolutely red faced, scary, violent tirades by Bill Clinton. So I think Travolta covered the range of that pretty
Yeah.
well.
I thought he was quite good actually. Emma Thompson is playing his wife. She says it's not based on Hillary, and I can believe it because she didn't act like Hillary at all. I didn't think she really had full control. She's British, and I actually one of my favorite actresses, but she didn't have full control over her American accent. So I thought she was fine, but not outstanding.
I actually thought her performance was quite good, not the impersonation.
Yeah.
I think she had to convey a range of emotions. She had to do humor at some points. She had to do breaking down, crying convulsions at some stages. And I thought she was pretty good. She had some of the nodding of the head that Hillary always does when somebody else is talking. She had some of the mannerisms down pretty well. I thought she was good.
Yeah.
And then there's Kathy Bates, of course,
Yeah.
who chewed the scenery, but I think in a good way. I think it was a good performance. It brought a lot of humor and entertainment to the film until the end when it was just tragic.
Well, she was definitely acting. I mean, she was chewing the scenery is right, and yeah, I mean, she was riveting on the screen, and she's like dialing it up to 11, and I thought she was um not very believable, but I'm glad that she was in the movie because she added a lot of color. And of course, that's the kind of performance to get you the Academy Award nomination.
Right.
Nothing, of course, as we mentioned, is nothing at all like Betsy Wright, or
That's
I assume.
right.
I don't know anything about Betsy Wright, but I can't imagine that anyone like her really exists. Billy Bob Thornton. What you think about him?
Didn't make a big impression on me. I mean, it just didn't stand out. I thought it was actually understated, and he
Yeah.
didn't have the Cajun accent down very well, I didn't think. And more while we're at it, Maura Tierney as Mandy Grunwald didn't do much for me either.
Yeah, I mean, she's a TV actress. I mean, what wasn't she in News Radio? Is that what it was?
Oh, I can't
Yeah,
remember.
she was on a TV show. I, I'm sure that Mandy Greenwald was happy to be portrayed by such an attractive actress, but must have thought like I have played a more important role in the campaign than this person. So
Yeah. What did you think of the Adrian Lester as the Stephanopoulos Burton character?
I thought he was actually very good. I've never seen him in anything else, and I was surprised to find out that he's British because I thought that he did an excellent job playing an American black political consultant. So I thought he was good. I mean, I found him believable. I thought he was actually had probably the best actor in the movie.
Hmm. I thought he was good. I thought he was so important to the movie. He was like the moral touchstone, how he was going to react to different situations and scenarios. But he was also, I think, probably in reality and appropriately, arrogant. See how quickly he took charge from being I don't really want to come into this campaign and meek and mild, and suddenly he's bossing people around and kind of demeaning junior staffers and all that. Boy, does that ring true for campaigns I've been on. And I've
Well, he was
seen
a
a lot.
professional. The thing that I found a little hard to believe is that he was in the movie, um, like a the chief of staff to another politician, and a congressman. And where did he develop? I'm not sure where he developed all these high level skills, being working for a congressman. You and I both worked for a congressman, and
And we sure didn't develop those
we
skills.
were sure not going to be hired to work to run a presidential campaign after that experience. So um, it was fine. I mean, it was an interesting thing they did. He's supposed to be the grandson of a prominent black leader because every time someone meets him, they say, "Oh, I marched with your grandfather in 62," or
Right.
Hillary says the last time I saw you was on the vineyard. You were running around in your underwear in the sprinklers. And then Carville keeps calling him Hotchkiss because he's third generation black elite, and he's much higher social class than Carville comes from. Carville is a Cajun, comes from nowhere. So I thought that was an interesting dynamic.
Yes. And I thought he was really good, especially at the end, too, when he had a confrontation scene with John Travolta.
Yeah, yeah. All right, let's talk about the history or the accuracy. Now, this is hard to do because we're talking about a movie about a book that is fictionalized. So there's like 3 degrees of separation here. We haven't read, neither of us have read the book, so we can't speak to how accurate it is compared to the book. But in terms of the history, so first,
Well,
I mean, yeah,
go ahead.
I would say the first half of the movie pretty much follows the Clinton campaign. Mario Cuomo did drop out. Jennifer Flowers did accuse Bill of having an affair, and Bill and Hillary did appear on 60 Minutes to defend their marriage. Bill was accused of slipperiness involving his behavior during the Vietnam War. He did come in second in New Hampshire and somehow get momentum from being the loser of the New Hampshire primary. So
Right.
all that
The
part is
comeback kid.
comeback kid, exactly. Um, and I was going to say that the two most famous remarks from that period, "comeback kid" and I am not some Tammy Wynette standing by my man," were not mentioned or anything similar to that.
Well, that was probably deliberate because that would have really tied it too closely
Right.
to the disclaimer. Sometimes I was thinking about this because, we're doing movies about American presidents, and this is a work of fiction. And I was thinking about this. Sometimes I think you and I are being too much sticklers on history.
Right.
All of the movies we're discussing are works of art. There can be fiction in the films about real presidents and truths in the films about fictional presidents. And by the way, while I'm at it, there can be tremendous selectivity and even fiction in the nonfiction books that you and I read to try to cross check the films for their history. Sometimes the books can be wrong and the movie can be right.
Right.
So I think I'm not being a nihilist here and saying there's no such thing as truth. And I do think that because the movies are very influential with the public, I think there is some value in still separating facts from stuff that's totally made up when we're looking at these movies. I mean, if people rely on this movie as a Clinton campaign biopic, they might think he really made a teenage girl pregnant,
Right.
which he didn't, or that Betsy Wright killed herself, which she didn't, or that the tapes Jennifer Flowers came up with were totally fake, which they weren't. So, on some level, fact checking is important. I think a better question with this movie is what truths does the movie reveal rather than which facts are right or wrong?
Well, what truths do you think it does reveal then?
Well, I think it's pretty accurate portrayal of our political process.
Right.
The horse race focus, the tabloid gotcha journalism, the win at all cost mentality, so that we can get into office and then be good people and do good. Um, and also that campaigns attract a lot of unbalanced, intemperate people who should never be anywhere near government once the candidate is elected.
Yeah. I'll buy all that. I think it's worth I personally find it interesting to, and maybe it's because I'm a stickler or to figure out like what actually did happen. I mean, they use the facts to create a truthfulness. I mean, we all saw what Jennifer Flowers looked like, and in the movie,
It
they
was
come out with a
hilarious.
they came out with a woman who looked exactly like Jennifer Flowers, making the accusation that she had an affair with Clinton. And so, and that's that. Obviously, that's to make it all seem like, oh, this really happened, and now that really happened. But you're right, there was no suicide. There was no teenage daughter that was seduced by Clinton. And so the second half of the
And
movie,
people,
I think the second half of the movie in general is not anything like the campaign, because the drama of the campaign was over basically after the I forget which, the Georgia primary, I think. Clinton was pretty quickly had the nominee, and you would have only had half a movie here if he'd followed what actually had happened. The second half of the movie is what's made up after. I mean, Paul Tsongas was dead in the water very soon after the early primaries, and what they did here is that make him practically literally dead, so that a whole new candidate could come in and create problems for Clinton. But that actually never happened. There was no Governor Picker or anything like that. I mean,
well,
that
except
campaign
that
was, yeah.
that's not 100% true because you had Perot, who actually dropped out after the
I'm talking about the
successful.
nomination. This
No,
movie is
no, but I'm talking about the overall 1992 layout of presidential politics. You did have a very threatening candidate to Clinton come in and then drop out and then get back in. And so you did have, I see your point, but you did have some of topsy-turvy kinds of things going on here that made this a very bizarre kind of presidential election where you ended up with an incumbent president ending up with a lower percent of the vote than either Herbert Hoover or Barry Goldwater.
Well, that's the thing about this movie is that it doesn't even cover. First of all, there's no reference to the incumbent president at all in this movie. You would never George Bush's name is never mentioned. You never um, it's all about the nomination. It's a very narrowly focused movie, and it doesn't even go up to the convention. It stops after Picker drops out, and you figure at that point he's going to go on, but there's
Right.
no. It's just it's really covers, I don't know, from let's say July 1991 to maybe the end of March 1992. It's a
It's
very,
basically his political survival story.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
how he was a minor candidate who started to gain traction and then almost got drummed out of the whole thing, but survived. That's really the time frame.
All right, let's talk about our favorite scenes.
Here, you go first.
All right, I thought I have four favorite scenes. Funniest scene, Bill, James Carvel, and Willie, the owner of the barbecue place. They all get drunk and start talking about their mamas. And at one end of the table, you have these three Southerners like doing a mamathon, and at the other end, you have these three stone cold Northerners looking on in amazement. I thought that was hilarious.
Right. And I think they were talking about tactical politics.
At the
Well,
same
the
time, yeah.
Southerners were crying and bonding over their mothers.
Right.
That was a
Right.
great
You know,
scene.
my mama, she lost her arm. I mean, they keep on like doing the worst. You know, she had diabetes and she lost her. I mean, it was so hilarious how they were trying to one up each other and how terrible the condition their mothers are in. All
I
right.
love the scene. I love the scene when Stanton was in New Hampshire speaking to the down and out union
Yep.
members.
Yep. Yep.
And I actually got a lump in my throat
I would
when
say this is actually my favorite scene too. Go ahead.
yeah, because there were very few scenes in this movie that actually dealt with the ideas, any ideas. And, you know, I don't necessarily agree with everything that he said, but he was basically trying to tell these people, I can't promise you I can ever bring your jobs back. But what we have to do is look at the world and the economy in a new way. And I thought it was a really good emotional scene. And I thought it was fantastic.
That was literally my favorite scene of the movie. And it was also amazing that that was a Democratic candidate that was saying all that stuff
Yes,
because he sounded just like Marco Rubio in 2016.
right. And you
Um,
wouldn't hear that today.
no,
Actually, probably from either
no, you wouldn't hear
side.
it from either side now, not after
Right.
no, I mean, and you know, that the philosophy that he was espousing in that movie was the sort of the standard operating philosophy of the elites from Reagan to Obama. I mean, you know, Trump ran against that consensus in 2016. The idea that this is an wide open international market, and we've got to be compete smarter. You know, you've got to you can't the muscle you need to exercise is the muscle between your ears.
Yeah.
You know, and that was and that's pretty much been discredited now politically at least. So no one wants to run on free market anymore.
Right.
All right. I thought the most accurate scene was when Stanton is at the very end. Stanton's trying to prevent Henry from quitting the campaign, and he cycles through all the various ways of persuasion available to him from,
That was one of my favorite
yeah,
scenes.
bullying, logic, appeals to liberal ideals, appeals to desire for fame and power, and finally, just straight out seduction. I mean, he is so persuasive in that scene.
Yeah, that reminded me of the LBJ treatment,
Yeah.
you know, and I thought Travolta was great in that scene too. And finally just wasn't going to take no for an answer. I
Yep.
mean, I couldn't have said no to that.
I know.
It was
Um,
really good.
you have another scene?
Uh, yeah, I think the scene where um, I think it was Billy Bob Thornton and maybe the Stephanopoulos character. They were dispatched to go and tell Hillary that they had to bring on
Oh yeah.
bring on the investigator to get into all of Bill's, cheating and
Right.
all that. But it had to be cleared with Hillary because it was going to get into all the painful stuff for her. And just the way that whole scene unfolded, where they tried to use these really coarse and silly, metaphors and analogies, and nobody, the women, including Hillary, couldn't understand a damn thing they were trying to get at.
Yeah, there's a bear
And
in the woods and he's
and
coming at you and it's like, am I the bear or who's the bear? You know,
right, it was so funny. And Hillary was just sitting there, stone faced impassively. And then eventually she understands what they're saying. And
yeah,
I just thought it's hard to describe in words, but the
right.
whole rollout of that scene was great.
Right, right. I thought the most heartbreaking scene was when Henry and the campaign manager, who I guess is supposed to be Harold Ickes, go down to the barbecue restaurant and ask the owner to ask his daughter to undergo amniocentesis to determine if Stanton is the father of the baby. Very depressing, very dirty scene.
Yes.
I mean, it was like,
Yeah.
ick, ick, ick.
Yeah. And I have to like the scene at the end with the Kathy Bates's confrontation with the Clintons.
Yeah,
She was hoping that they would reject leaking all the bad stuff they had found about Governor Picker. And the Stantons, we should say, did not miss a beat,
right,
immediately strategizing how to use that to their advantage, having
right,
absolutely no moral question
right.
whatsoever. And did you notice that in their kitchen where they were having this meeting, there was a portrait of George Washington hanging on the wall? I thought that was a nice touch.
Okay. Favorite lines. All right. I'll just start. I'll say this is not my favorite line, but I will note that the final line of dialogue in the movie is a woman saying to Stanton at the inaugural ball, "Now don't break our hearts." And I'm sure that Nichols and May believe that's exactly what Clinton did.
Oh, yeah, I didn't think of that. That's definitely true. I liked when we really should stop saying Hillary, I guess.
I, I,
So,
I know it's
let's see that.
confusing here. Like, is it Hillary? Is it Emma Thompson? Is it Susan? I
Right.
mean,
Yeah. Well, the Susan character says to Stanton, in their first scene, she lashes out saying, "I have to go fly fishing thanks to you, you a-hole." Except she didn't say a-hole. I thought that was good. And
I
I
got to hand it
loved
to
when,
Elaine May. I mean, this.
yeah.
I mean, you can see why that she's so highly respected, and because they were line after line after line. When we could go on and on, but go ahead. What was something else?
Well, the other thing was when they were meeting with Senator Osio, who was supposed to be Cuomo, and they were going
Governor
to talk
Ozio.
Governor Osio, yeah, and they were talking politics, and Osio, old school, and who obviously had no understanding of who wore the pants in the Clinton
Oh well, first
operation.
of all, that was his son. Oh, that was Andrew
Oh,
Cuomo.
was it? Yeah, okay, it was the son.
Andrew
Turns,
Cuomo.
yeah, turns to
Yeah,
Hillary and says, "Oh, you wouldn't mind if we talk some business for a while, would you?" Like she's the typical political wife, and
right.
she just develops this total stone face. Not at all. How else would I learn? And you can just see what's going on underneath her. She had a few profanities ready to come out, but they didn't. I like that one.
Yeah, that was funny too. Stanton talks to Henry, his black campaign manager, and he says, Henry, you still got your mama with you? And Henry says, no, she's in Beverly Hills with her second husband.
That was great. And another one that I thought sort of touching, in a way, when Carville says to Burton slash Stephanopoulos, your problem is you have galloping TB. And he said, "What's galloping TB?" True believerism.
Yeah,
And that was a reflection on the politics around. You had people that really, really believed, and then you had people that this was just another job.
yeah. I have to
I thought that
say,
was kind of
yeah.
harrowing.
Um, I thought when the Carville character, Billy Bob Thornton, said to Burton, who is this upper class black guy. First of all, he's just exposed himself to a campaign staffer, and Burton, like pulls him into the room and starts yelling at him and says, "You ever heard of Anita Hill?" Which I think, okay, and he says, and Carville says, "You called me a redneck, which I'm proud to say I am. You're a honky. You just look black, and it's your best part. Lets you intimidate the pale faces and work that voodoo sexual magic on white girls. I'm blacker than you are. I got slave in me. I can feel it."
And
So,
that, folks, is maybe the reason why you couldn't find the book in the library, and you might start getting hard to find this movie.
oh, and there's one other thing before we go on. Larry Hagman asks, the Governor Picker asks people to donate blood, and Stanton turns to his aide and says, "Jesus Christ, we should have thought of that."
That was on my list too. That was a
Okay.
good one.
Okay.
Yeah, that blood thing.
That blood thing, yeah.
And in their emotional meeting at the end of the movie, that's still on Stanton's mind. He goes, "Oh, that was a really good move. That
Yeah, I
blood."
know, really good move. And Picker even says, "Yeah, I never really expected it to take off." So they're comparing their political strategies there.
But why did a heart attack necessitate thousands of people giving blood? I'm not sure. Anyway,
Oh, I know, it's just completely off. It was off the top of his head. I
but it
mean,
was a good move.
it was a good move. Yeah. All right. Let's talk about the relevance or comparison to politics and society today. I mean, what do you think?
Well, actually, you mentioned it in reference to the Reagan campaign. Maybe that was an outlier, but I think today's actual campaigning, with one exception, has become more mechanized and controlled and corporate. We saw this in the W. Bush campaign. It was more, and the Obama campaign, remember, no drama Obama.
Yeah.
You didn't have this sort of backroom country boy kind of let's fly by the seat of our pants operation. I think it's much more mechanized now. I think personal flaws are more old hat and accepted now. We've had boomer presidents. You can admit that you did a lot of drugs like Obama did, and not just marijuana, cocaine, and all that. And you're not drummed out of the candidacy. God knows Trump had his peccadillos.
Yeah.
And I think TB is still around. It was galloping true believerism, except unfortunately now it's true disbelieverism. So you have people living and dying to defeat another candidate, not necessarily supporting a candidate. So you got all these people, huge swaths of people who absolutely, for example, can't stand our current president, but are going to vote for him because their true disbelieverism is that they absolutely couldn't fathom having Trump again. So I think that there's a lot of the extremism we saw starting in this movie in terms of how people felt about candidates. I think you've got that even to greater extremism now.
Yeah, I mean, this is a good reminder that our so-called culture wars have been going on for a long time. It was Patrick Buchanan who said this during his campaign it was Patrick Buchanan who said that in 1992 we were already in the middle of a culture war, and politics has always been nasty. We always tend to romanticize the past a little bit, but this is a reminder, if we need one, not to romanticize the Clinton administration. It's also a reminder of how much the Democratic Party's changed. I mean, the people at the New Hampshire town hall who were so upset in that scene you talked about the closed factory, those people are all Trump supporters today. No one on the Democratic side is even trying to reach out to them. And these
and they all would have booed. They all would boo what the Clinton character said. Boo him off the stage.
And these are the same people, literally the people that Hillary called deplorable. So I mean, politics has changed a lot in the 35 years since this movie, or 30 years since this movie came out. Speaking of which, could this movie be made today?
Yes, but it would have to be geared to one side or the other. It has to either be a total love fest or a total hate fest. I just don't think you would see a tragic comedic portrayal. They'd have to make the president look all good or all bad, depending on the politics of the filmmaker. I think we're too bifurcated now.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I would say this movie could definitely not be made now. And it was made within a very small window between Clinton's reelection in 1996 and the Monica Lewinsky scandal in 1998. That's the only period in which Hollywood liberals would feel free to criticize Clinton for disappointing them. Anything earlier would have jeopardized his reelection and handed the White House to the GOP. And by 1988, he was being impeached, and they rallied around him. I mean, even though they had to hold their nose to do it, again, when you impeach a president, that's his moderate supporters, not moderate, his weak supporters are going to rally around him because they're more opposed to the people trying to do the impeaching than they are to the into the impeachment itself.
Yeah,
So
that's what I was getting at about true
mhm,
disbelieverism.
mhm.
And we're more defined by who we hate and who we're against than who we're for in today's politics. It's really unfortunate.
Yeah, no, it's terrible the way politics is, and and I think we have to blame. I'm gonna blame Nixon, Clinton, and Trump. That these three people who were impeached or almost impeached. They may not have deserved to be impeached under strictly legal grounds, but none of them would have been if their parties had control, and none of them would have been if their parties had controlled the House. But they all made hypocrites out of their followers by making them defend indefensible behavior. And the women who defended Clinton for having an affair with a 21-year-old intern or something. I mean, how could they have done that after they'd been, after they'd gone through the whole Anita Hill thing? I mean, they were all hypocrites, and he um, made him into hypocrites,
But they
and
did.
and it
And
just made the country more, hate each other more.
one of the premier grassroots organizations, quite effective on the Democratic left side today, is called
Right,
MoveOn.org. But
right.
guess where MoveOn.org got its name?
Yeah, move on from move on
From the
from this all
Clinton
concern
Clinton
about
scandals.
the president's peccadillos. Yeah.
We shouldn't care about it.
Um, yeah, that was before me too. Okay. So if you were a high school teacher, would you assign this movie?
No, they're too young. It's too profane. It's too graphic in some spots, but maybe a college class
Maybe.
studying modern American politics as a way to, you know, as a way to get into the period.
Yeah, I
I
agree.
might
I mean,
consider it.
there's too much swearing, and it's also very, very confusing morally to high school kids. So I would not. So, what would you grade the movie?
I'd give it a B. It was generally well done, and there are hilarious and insightful parts of the movie, but it's kind of a downer for me. It's a discouraging movie. I don't like depressing movies as much as you do.
Yeah, I'd give it a B plus. I mean, I thought it was um eye-opening, and I thought it was actually an amazing movie. The idea that you could make a movie like that is just astounding to me. But I would also, it was a little, as I said before, a little hard to follow and a little too, dirty. I mean, it was just rough. It's hard to swallow some of all of that.
Yeah. Well,
All
now,
right.
Gary, should we do the big reveal?
What we're gonna do
The
next?
reveal, no, we have to, I think, out of be honest with the audience, the entire podcast you've just listened to, folks, not just the summary, was AI. Uh, the real, the real me was taking, I don't know what Gary was doing for the last hour, but the real me was taking a nap. So I think just out of a sense of integrity, we have to let folks know that.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, fair enough. Fair enough. Now our cat is out of the bag. Our advertisers are going to dump us for sure.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. All right.
Start
So
working again.
we've reached the end of our another podcast here. I hope we avoided getting canceled. And since we tiptoed across many landmines here. Um, Podcast, I'm going to remind everyone it's available on Apple, Spotify, Amazon. You can subscribe there. You can our next movie is W, the movie about George Bush, which Jim tells me made money. So okay, that'd be interesting. Look forward. I've never seen it. I think you have, Jim, so we'll talk
I
about
have. It was a long time ago.
it. Yeah. Okay.
Did I say it made money? I'm not sure I said
I
that
think
one
I
made
thought you
money.
just said it was one of the
No,
three movies.
JFK.
Oh no, it didn't make money. There's another
Yeah,
flop. Yeah. All right. So we
yeah.
got another flop on our hands next week. Okay.
Good. Well, let's keep it going.
Let's keep it going.
But these are good movies, folks.
No,
So
I'm really glad we're doing this because this is a movie I never would have watched, and just like I never would have watched 13 Days. So I'm glad to see these.
me too.
All right.
Especially PT 109. That was just super.
Yeah, that's an inside joke, folks. So you have to go back and listen to that podcast to find out what we each think about PT 109. All right. So we'll see you next time discussing W, the Oliver Stone movie that is surprisingly sympathetic to George W. Bush. Who would have known?
Or as Texans would call it, W.
W. Okay. Bye, everyone.
I've never helped run a presidential campaign before.
Neither have we.
From Mike Nichols, director of The Birdcage, comes the story of a man
I'm gonna do something really outrageous. I'm gonna tell the truth.
who said yes to destiny,
I'm gonna win this thing.
but couldn't say no
Apple fitter?
Honey, please, popcorn.
to anything else.
Governor Jack Stanton seduced me.
It is not true.
Oh, sorry.
We've had some tough times in our marriage, but we worked them out.
Jackie's done some pretty stupid things in his life, and he's got enemies.
This has to be handled just right. Just right.
I'm gonna want a signed confession.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Mister, you're about to become Mrs.
Okay.
Ain't this just great?
Universal Pictures presents John Travolta,
What's he governor of again?
Emma Thompson,
Jack Stanton could also be a great man if he weren't such a pompous, disorganized, slime-sucking
Psychotic.
Get me out!
You just threw the phone out the window.
Primary Colors,
Does this guy have a chance in hell?
No.
Perfect.
screenplay by Elaine May.